thank you for coming. I hope we're on, we're mic'd. I'm going to aspire to juggle. Of course, I wore the outfit that has 0 clips on it, so no pockets, no belts, nothing to bolt anything onto, so hopefully I won't be clicking the microphone and speaking into the slide forwarder. So thank you for coming and spending your afternoon with us. And it is balmy here in Boston. I was here 2 weeks ago, and it was chilly, and I had a coat, and then I got off the plane last night, and it was 72 degrees outside. So I don't know what's going on, but it's a little bit crazy and actually quite nice. And I haven't looked outside. Maybe it's already raining by now. We are on the road. We're doing a little road show, kind of taking our act to, 40 plus different cities and internationally as well. And really just kind of talking a little bit about secure mobility and how we view the world unfolding around this. When we start the conversation, there's lots of what I'm going to say hype, shall we say. It seems like almost every week there's some other new incident in the paper, whether it's security or privacy, a retailer. I mean, the cybercrime conversation has continued to escalate. And so whereas a year ago, folks would have been talking to us about how do I give email to a broader number of users, how do I replace BlackBerries, today the customer's talking about a whole variety of different things. Almost every part of their business is touching mobile. And this is incredibly real. Not only is the opportunity real, but the fear is real. The threat is actually real. Recent reports say about 1 in 6 users have actually had their device compromised in one way or another in the last year. 1 in 6. That's huge, right? And this, by the way, was before the heartbleed, heartfelt, heart whatever that's been in the news for the past week. And as I said, the opportunity behind mobile has never been bigger. So, IDC says that more than 1 billion devices will connect to the business or come to work either because companies bought them or because employees brought them. Regardless of how they get there, mobility is increasingly becoming, if it's not already today, the primary fabric of the enterprise. It is the #1 screen. I think increasingly as organizations move forward, they're thinking about not just mobility first, but in some cases mobility only. We work with some companies that have deployed broad surrender programs where they have employees coming in and handing in a laptop to be able to do their job on a tablet or be able to turn in one kind of device for the opportunity to have an application that runs on multiple devices. So the opportunity is massive and the threat is very real. And while this sounds like a big challenge, I don't think folks always necessarily understand the complexity behind solving the problem. So this picture is a mobile phone. It's a mobile phone the way we view a mobile phone. We don't view a mobile device as the piece of glass that's sitting in your pocket. We view it as the endpoint for a variety of different data systems that you just happen to be interfacing through a piece of glass that you're holding in your pocket. So that little icon in the middle is really meant to be exchange. I don't know if you're like me, but the first thing I do before my feet are even on the ground in the morning is I'm checking my email. And while I log in and provide the credentials to just that one simple app, in fact, I'm probably providing credentials to the network that would have the ability to open up or wake up, a dozen or more different back-end systems within my organization, right? Especially with, systems today, lots of people's Exchange ActiveSync password is the same password they use for their network credentials, for their VPN, for their back-end databases. Single sign-on is a beautiful thing, so I crack you once and I get everything you ever had access to within the organization. So that's what these little triangles are meant to sort of indicate, which is by the time I get to 10 a.m. in the morning and I've accessed maybe a dozen different mobile devices or mobile applications or mobile systems, the number of back-end network points that now I've provided some credentials or accessed some data from is actually incredibly massive. So the problem is not how do I manage the piece of glass? The problem is how do I manage the data as somebody who wants to provide data out to a user of one of those pieces of glass? If the way that I'm allowing that user to conduct business with me, whether it's an employee or an end user of my company, is that they provide some credentials or some level of multi-factor authentication so I know who they are and then I serve them data. That data has to travel through this network. We talk to customers all of the time. Very, very simple things. turning on iCloud, turning on sort of the cloud as a whole on the device. If you didn't secure and firewall off the data from the rest of the device, instantly, your data could be propagating through this very complex network. I had a very surreal experience 2 weekends ago. Because I used to work at Apple, have maybe a dozen old Macs across my home, and I decided that I wanted to pull together all of the photos from all of these devices and put them on one hard drive. And so, geek that I am, that was my Sunday afternoon project. I went and got myself a new laptop, and I had all of the various different Thunderbolt cables and all of the different cables to put them all together. And there was a photo that I thought was maybe less than attractive. And I thought, well, I don't need to, I'll just delete that. The thing is, I couldn't delete the flipping thing. Every time I opened up one of the new PCs, the photo was still there. And then I'd delete it again, and I'd go to the next one, and the photo was still there. And so the beautiful thing about streaming photos and media and data across all these different devices is that it's always on and it's instantly there. But gosh help you if you, for some reason, want to eliminate any piece of that data or prevent that data from getting across all of those various different screens. So when I think of this as a CIO, and I'll admit that I was only a CIO for a brief period of my career between when we sold Motorola to Google and then I came to Good. I was at Citigroup for a short period of time and responsible for their global mobile and digital technology groups. We thought about how do we provide data or applications out to a series of different constituencies, right? The first and easiest to think about is my employees. How do I give access to enterprise information to my employees, either on devices I purchase for them or devices I allow them to bring? The second was sort of the focus of my time there, which was how do I provide mobile banking or mobile data capabilities out to my customers or maybe my business partners, right? You could imagine I'm an insurance broker and I want all of my adjusters or brokers, or an insurance company and I want all of my brokers and adjusters out in the field to have access to a set of data and a set of information for a period of time. That period of time is while we're working together. If they decide to stop working with my company, I want the ability to pull my data back. Not just change the password, not just lock off the network, but actually pull my data back so that if, in fact, their device becomes one of the 1 in 6 that gets compromised, even after we're no longer working together, I still am comfortable that my data did not get breached as a result of whatever happened to them. This doesn't get simpler, this gets harder, right? At Good for Christmas, we gave all of the employees, well, it was after Christmas because, January is a neutral time to give gifts that we don't have to say it was for Christmas. In January, we gave all of the employees Fitbits. That was a part of our sort of healthy company initiative. Interestingly enough, these Fitbits can actually be used as an authentication device for a mobile device if you were clever and played with it in sort of some way. So increasingly, the network of smart devices that I'm going to have to either provision data to or become interoperable with is going to get more complex before it gets simple. If I'm the CIO of Starbucks, I'm thinking, how do I give my executives email? I'm thinking, how do I give my board members the board package for the board meeting? I'm thinking about how do I give my customers access to Starbucks applications, and I'm thinking about how do I use some of these other interesting devices so that if I maybe walked up to a device with my Fitbit or my cell phone, I could use that as an authentication for additional services. All of these are mobility strategies. All of these involve data traveling through that network. So when you're trying to solve one of those problems, what are the various different approaches? And I would say this is a very busy space. Gartner in January, February of last year said they were tracking over 130 different companies that were coming into the enterprise mobility space. Now, we've been in the enterprise mobility space for a long time. Good, if you know us, we've been doing this for about 18 years. We have a very long, storied history of working on data security on mobile devices. But not everybody has approached the problem in the same way. So number one response I hear from customers when I go and talk to them for the first time and say, what are you doing to protect your devices? They say, not that much. We made Exchange ActiveSync available. We don't need much more than that. I mean, our employees don't really have sensitive information. Or this is an administrative assistant or, somebody in marketing, or maybe they're a facilitator of some sort. They really don't have anything that we're really worried about leaking. I guarantee you, if they have access to anything, they have a username and password that if I were to able to take a device protected with MDM or just Exchange ActiveSync, crack that device, get the credentials off of that device, I could use those credentials to be able to access data in a variety of different places across your network. What people don't understand is that very often the data somebody's trying to access is not even on the phone. Right? They're just trying to get enough information to be able to launch an attack from somewhere else within the organization. So I would argue there isn't anyone in your organization who doesn't have data. Everybody, by the very nature that they're getting exposure to data within your network somewhere, has access to something that I'm guessing you would likely not want out on the open internet. There was a very popular strategy for how you would solve this problem, and that was, if you are someone who I'm asking to do work information, I'm going to give you a work device. So I'll buy you a device. You'll use that device for email and calls that have to do with work. Please don't do your personal business on that device, and just use something else if you really feel the need to have a separate cell phone. And by the way, that worked really well for a long time. I loved my BlackBerry for a very long time. The challenge is users today have higher expectations. Number one, apps matter. They care that they want Facebook and Instagram and all of these other applications on their device. Number two, they are smart enough to figure out that if you won't let them have their applications on the work device, that they know how to send your data to their device. And you won't have to raise your hand, but just silently acknowledge to yourself how many times you've sent an attachment to Gmail because you couldn't open it on the device that IT gave you, so that you could print it or edit it or do something else with it. No show of hands, but I might not be the only one that's ever tried that. So I think users have gotten to a place where they know how to manage the data themselves. They understand that these things can coexist, and they're smart enough to find a way around whatever obstacles we put in front of them. So when I sit in front of a customer and they say to me, I don't have this problem, my users just know. I tell them I'm going to give you a phone, and because I paid for it, it's mine, and these are the only things you're allowed to use, and they know. We have an understanding. They're just going to follow the rules. I had an example of a very large French cosmetics company that was saying this. They were a good customer, and they had corporate libel and BYO happening at the same time. And the corporate libel had a very strong policy on it. The BYO had a slightly less policy on it. And it was the CSO that said, I just tell them on the corporate libel devices, they're not allowed to install anything, they can't put anything. My users just accept it and respect it because I'm paying the bills. And then he left the room, and the CIO said, well, let me tell you what's actually going on. What's actually going on is that guys are trying to get out of the corporate program and get into the BYO program, and we let them because if we don't, they're just going to forward their data whether we tell them they can or not. So there's another approach that says, look, what you did on BlackBerry worked really well for a period of time, which was manage the device. The way I protect bad data from getting on the device is I don't allow other applications to get on the device in the first place. And that worked really well with BlackBerry, and now everybody wants iPhones and Android devices, so I'll just do the same kind of policy management on new smartphones that I was doing on the other smartphones, and it will all work out great. But everything I just went through about limiting the user experience, where the user starts to become the vulnerability that you're trying to protect your data against in the first place, is going to be true no matter what the device is. People didn't have this reaction to BlackBerry because they didn't love the phones. I loved my BlackBerry. I love the keyboard. They had this reaction because they didn't have the ability to have an easy experience between corporate and personal, and they couldn't get the apps that they really, really wanted on some of those devices. So applying sort of the same kind of MDM you had on previous devices on new devices might work. There are some use cases where we tell customers that's exactly what they should be doing. I was talking to a customer this morning. We were talking about tablets going into retail branches where a customer would walk in, sit down, do their account opening. You know, that device is going to be in that branch all the time. In fact, if that tablet leaves the branch, you want that device to turn off. That's a perfect example of where doing device management, and very heavy device management, makes a ton of sense. It might not be the same set of tools that are appropriate for these mixed-use devices that we were talking about a moment ago. There's a theory that says I'm just going to install 2 operating systems. So I'll have corporate Christy and consumer Christy, and I'll put all of my corporate applications on one half and all of my consumer applications on the other. And that works really, really well so long as you assume that you are a 2-dimensional personality. When you start to have a little bit more schizophrenia and you have multiple personalities, that's going to be a problem. So what other personalities are you going to have? Well, your healthcare organization is going to push applications to you that are going to have secure data, that they're going to have policies and be managed. And they're probably going to be a series of them, right? Lab results, and maybe scheduling an appointment, and maybe doing some scheduling of services within the hospital. Generally, these are different applications. the hospital administrator or the IT organization within the hospital is the one that is going to be deciding what kinds of devices they want those services accessed on, who gets access to which ones for you as a consumer. As a consumer, the hospital cannot tell you, the bank cannot tell you what kinds of devices they want you conducting mobile banking on. They can only control where they let their data go. So as a bank, you could say, you can run my mobile bank, you can check your balance on any device that's out there. I'm not going to let you do a large transaction on a device that I suspect has been jailbroken or rooted. And that's a policy you can set on an application that's in this one of these B2B or B2B2C scenarios, in which case, that's an example of having multiple personalities. So the perimeter you're setting around the operating system might not be granular enough. I'm almost through, we're almost there. I told you, 130 companies. There had to be a lot of different great ideas on how to solve the problem if you were going to have 130 companies, right? Virtualization. So this is the theory that just like in call centers, I was virtualizing an operating system, and rather than giving you a new PC with a native operating system that I had to administer and manage, I would just let you open up a terminal session, and I'd be essentially sending you a video stream and a data feed, and you would be clicking and interacting locally, but actually all of the processing and transaction intelligence is actually up in the cloud. Again, this makes a ton of sense in use cases where, number one, the form factor of what you're virtualizing on and the application you're virtualizing from are somewhat the same, right? If you try to think of virtualizing a PC onto something with a screen this big, no matter how much you sort of rejigger the UI, it's going to be painful. Number two, that theory only really works so long as you assume that you are in a fixed location with a big cable hanging in the back of whatever you're trying to interoperate on. Because that architecture assumes that you're holding that connection open all the time. And so that's how it's able to do. You hit a keystroke and it acknowledges it on the back end. So in some use cases makes a ton of sense. And like that retail branch tablet, for example, might be another case of where something like virtualization might make sense if they have a strong Wi-Fi network sitting there. But if you're talking about offline email or going and working offline as a nurse or as a police officer, might not be, again, the best experience for what you're trying to do. And then we get to our favorite. You knew the punchline was going to be containerization. Why do we think that why have we always believed that this is the right place to start? And it's because I believe fundamentally that applications are the new objects. If you think about how a user tries to get work done, right? Generally they are stringing together 3 or 4 different tasks. Even if I take just very simple example of email, right? Email being the simplest example of all, I'm really just trying to read, edit, compose email, right? I want the credentials, I want the data coming from the email service, I want the documents, I want absolutely everything associated with the corporate source hidden from the native operating system. Because I'm going to assume that I'm a bank sending out consumer banking or that I'm a hospital sending out patient information. I'm going to assume that I'm in a hostile environment no matter where I land. And that means I'm not going to rely on the native operating system to store my credentials. I'm not going to rely on a lot of the native services around me. I'm going to have to contain everything I need, my entire architecture, inside the secure space I've created. Now, if I think about more complex workflows, I'm reading an email, I want to, say I get a form I need to fill out. I open the form in some sort of forms editor. Let's say I want to take a picture and attach it to the form. Let's say it's a real estate application, and I want to get the customer to sign that with their finger using something like DocuSign. That on its own is not going to be a big monolithic application. That's probably going to be 4 or 5 different apps. You have email, you have document editing, you have DocuSign, you might have secure printing, you have secure image taking. So there's 4 or 5 different applications in that one simple workflow. What you need is each of those applications to be secure, and for the data to be secure within them. But if they're owned by the same policyholder, you need them to be able to communicate with one another so that the camera can take a picture and pass it over to the form without it ending up in white space in between. So in our mind, the way we solve the complexity problem is you start with the data. You start with the data, you contain the data in the application, and then you allow, with a rich services architecture, the ability for these applications to work with one another and still retain the high level of security credentials that we've put around it. So if I look at this picture again, my device is really a multi-tenant environment. You know, I have the set of applications that my CIO has given me in the B2E side. This is my email, my collaboration applications. A CIO is the policy holder. He sets the policy for what I can do with that data. Maybe in the B2B scenario, let's say I'm on a company board and I'm using one of the board pad applications that we saw was one of our sponsors of the event today. Let's say I've got mobile banking and hospital information on that device as well. Very likely those applications are also secured and contained, but the policyholder is not me, the user. It's not my CIO. It's whoever the CIO is of the source of the data, wherever that came from. And as you see, this is going to kind of get increasingly complex. But to me, the user, I just have a series of applications. I have a native home screen, and I'm just going in and out of my apps and doing my job as though there was nothing going on behind the scene. When we look at that, creating the applications is actually just the beginning of the challenge. Right? So there's the set of applications that we provide, good for enterprise, email, collaboration. It's sort of secure apps out of the box. But then there's going to be a whole bunch of other applications that you need to create or that you need to procure from the ecosystem. Salesforce, Cognos, DocuSign. I mean, the list is very long. And you want these applications to be able to share policy. You want to be able to give those apps also to your employees. So we have a whole set of tools, wrapping and compiling, that allows you to apply the same kind of technology that we use on our applications on your own, or to be able to procure it from a third party. There's device management, there's application management to support all of those use cases we've talked about. And then there's support. Now, one of the presentations that I'm very excited you guys are going to hear about today is really the one around mobile service management. And this was the acquisition we just completed with a company called Boxtone. When you think about how many mobile devices are coming into your organization, when somebody calls you at 4 o'clock in the morning and says, my email's not working, and that somebody, by the way, is generally the CEO, because they're the ones that like the shiny toys first. They say, my email's not working. Your support guys have a heart attack because they say, oh my gosh, okay, so which of the devices is it? And which network are you on? And do you have data turned on? And which Exchange server are you connecting to? And what are all of the different apps that you have? And so there's a supportability perspective that I think has largely not been talked about within mobility yet. When I said mobility becomes the primary fabric of the enterprise landscape, then I think that supporting that, just like we saw with PCs, total cost of ownership is going to become a massive driver in this conversation. How do I allow users to use a variety of different devices, tablets for some tasks, phones for others, different employees have different apps, some get to choose, some don't. And then how do I deal with the supportability of when somebody calls because they have a problem? And Boxtone actually answers that for us. They allow you to build this data-driven view of what's actually going on within your mobile estate across BlackBerry devices, across good-enabled devices, across MDM and Exchange ActiveSync. And when you call and say, my message is not working, I'm not getting what I need on my device, they can look and they say, you, Christy, have 3 devices. This is the one you says has a problem. It's this kind of device on this network operator coming into the network from here, and it's on this Exchange server. And oh yes, I see that it reset 20 minutes ago, and you should be just fine as soon as that system comes back up and we're all okay. So lots of cool stuff happening there. I'm excited for you guys to see it because I think we're very excited about having that join the good family. I think we started with security, and so I'm going to kind of stay with security. None of this matters if we don't get security right to start with. You can do an amazing job of managing things. You can do an amazing job with app stores and other things, but if you aren't securing the data, then all of those points are somewhat mute. So we spend a lot. You're going to hear from Dr. Nico van Summeren, who is our CTO and CSO. We invest a lot in security, and we also invest a lot in other people's auditing of our security. So it's not enough for us to stand in front of our public sector customers or our regulated industry customers and say, trust us, we're secure, we got your back. Right? There has to be somebody, independent third parties like Common Criteria, that they can put on the table and say, we've submitted it, it's been tested, it's been certified, other people have validated our credentials in being able to protect the data. Security is never done, it's a constant process, but it's something that we're vigilant about, and we invest a lot. You're going to talk a little bit about the various different products. So I started with Good for Enterprise. So Good for Enterprise is, as I said, productivity in a box. It's email, it's address book, it's calendar. It connects to Exchange, it connects to Lotus Notes. Collaboration Suite is where we add the ability to add things like SharePoint, being able to access SharePoint from your mobile devices, secure behind the firewall browsing without a VPN. The application store, so you can distribute and manage applications more broadly. Instant messaging, so hooking into your existing IM infrastructure, so you can do instant messaging, whether using Link on the back end or something else. And then Good Dynamics, which is our platform for how you create and secure additional applications. We work with a broad ecosystem of third parties. So we have a little over 1,400 registered unique applications. I would say if we strip out those that were either generated by us or those that were not currently active, we're probably somewhere north of 1,100. These are just some of the commercial third parties we work with. It's names like IBM, HP, DocuSign. You saw some of the names that we had on the box is a great example. But I would say for every commercial application we see out in the market, there's probably 30 to 40 in-house applications that our customers have written for themselves. I have one customer in Europe. It's actually a country. They started with the App Store first. They had 18 different CIOs. Each CIO was of a different public sector agency. They were trying to centralize IT. They said, we're going to start with the App Store. We're going to give you guys all the tools. And whether you're tax or whether you're justice, you can deploy your own mobility strategy, but you have a common framework and an application store. You develop your app or procure your app. You submit it to us. If it's on the platform, we put it in the App Store. Your users are fine. So there's lots of different entry points through this. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time, but I wouldn't be doing my job as a CEO if I didn't put up some Harvey Ball chart that said, we're the only one that has the complete solution. We firmly believe that our longevity in the industry has given us the ability to invest and create the complete solution. I think we're a trusted source for a lot of companies because we've been doing this for a very long time, but that also means that we have a very complete platform. We're not scrambling to kind of build it up as our customers are just starting to deploy. I talked a little bit about our customer base. So Good has always been known as strong in what I'd call highly regulated environments. And that's really because of our roots. We were generally brought in in the early years by government customers or financial institutions that had a very high regulatory profile they had to live within. And because of that, they needed a mobility platform that would allow them to manage the risk and be compliant with that profile. I would say today about 50% of my customers are sitting in some sort of regulated environment. The top three would be financial services, public sector, healthcare. But the remaining 50% of my customers are pretty much everybody else. When you look at who the breaches have been coming from over the past 6 months, right, you're not just seeing denial of service attacks on banks anymore. You're seeing major retailers. You're seeing transportation companies. You're seeing, there isn't a company profile out there that doesn't have some data. The kind of problem solvers within these organizations has also dramatically changed. It's no longer just the responsibility of the guys deploying the email team or deploying the security architecture. We often get brought into board-level conversations where the board is asking the management team, should we be trusting mobile, and what have you put in place to ensure that we're doing that safely? So I'm going to end with this. I think that I hope there's a lot of exciting stuff that's going to entertain you, educate you, at least open up an interesting dialogue for the rest of the afternoon. I think that Good as an organization has, I said, been doing this for a long time. We have long since been acknowledged as one of the leaders in the space. But I would say we also have a very broad and a more complete solution. And we have a lot of very foundational IP. So we have about 250 patents across the various different, either pending or already granted, across the various different parts of the system. Why do you care about that? It means that we've put a lot of thought into this. We've put a lot of investment into this. And we're very thoughtful about how we deploy this. So with that, I'm actually going to introduce Dr. Nico van Sumeren, who is our CTO and CSO. Thank you.
Thank you.